What's up, everybody? Welcome to the home team, the show where no matter who you cheer for, here you're a part of the home team. Hit like, hit subscribe, share the channel with anybody you know who loves football. It would mean the world to me. Thank you very much. So today we are doing the predictions, the game picks for the Sunday slate of games. I'm going to be doing a separate video for the primetime Monday night game, and I'm going to be doing that throughout the season. So Thursday and Monday we'll get separate breakdowns, and then all the Sunday ones will go together. So we are 2 games into the season, and it has shown us a couple of things. Number one, it's still week 1, and we're seeing a lot of sloppy things from teams. For the Chiefs and the Ravens, we saw a little bit of uncharacteristic sloppiness from Baltimore in particular. Kansas City still looked relatively sharp, though I wouldn't say that they weren't quite what we expected. Other than a couple really explosive plays from Xavier Worthy, which were great. They were a little bit bogged down, but I expect that Kansas City will only get better as the year progresses, as they always do. And I expect Baltimore will. And I expect that by the time we get to the playoffs, that week 1 game's not really going to matter much. And I can say the same thing for the Packers and the Eagles. They were both odd, and frankly, in a lot of ways, that isn't a game I put a whole lot of stock to, and there's so many circumstances that are so odd. Whenever you go into like such an international, like a crazy international game, you never quite know how teams are going to respond to that. And I say that particularly for the defenses of both those teams. Neither one of those defenses ended up being particularly great, though they both had their moments. I think that in particular the Packers had a strong showing in like the first couple possessions where their offense couldn't really capitalize, and then the Eagles sort of reeled them back in, and then by the end they were just like trading touchdowns and field goals the whole time basically. And then obviously the Jordan Love injury at the end is the thing that matters the most. From the sound of it, it's a sprained MCL, not expected to be season ending, but he is expected to still miss some time. So I'd say that's probably the biggest thing that comes out of that game is the Packers may have to go a while without Jordan Love. As for the Eagles, good for them for getting that win. Obviously, better to be 1-0 than 0-1. And I am much more interested in seeing how that team plays when they get to play back either in Philly or just in a more normal environment for them. Because, I've said for a while in general that I believe that they're a formidable team, and I personally think Saquon Barkley is probably going to win Offensive Player of the Year. And as far as Week 1 goes, that looks pretty good. So, so those are the first 2 games, and let's get on to the Sunday slate, shall we? So, first up, we got Pittsburgh in Atlanta taking on the Falcons. This is a very interesting game, in my opinion, mostly because I've run into this conundrum quite a few times with Pittsburgh, honestly, which is I don't think they're as talented as the team they're playing, but I have much more faith in their culture and in the stuff they're made of, And in week 1, when Kirk Cousins is coming off the ACL injury Achilles injury, excuse me. So, you never quite know if somebody's going to come back from that. And in his first game back, does he trust it? It's not necessarily a new offense. It's from the same scheme as he's been in for basically the entirety of his career, but it's a whole new group of guys. And there's oftentimes an adjustment period. And I just think that Pittsburgh's the type of team where, last year notwithstanding, Pittsburgh beat Buffalo in week 1 a couple years ago. They beat Cincinnati in week 1 the year before that. San Francisco smacked them last year. But, you're not going to win them all. I just think that Pittsburgh, they tend to start the year pretty well. Then they sort of come down a little bit, and at the end they sort of gather themselves and make a push. So I think that week 1, Pittsburgh will be able to take it. I think that by the end of the year, Atlanta will be more formidable than the Steelers. But I think to start, Atlanta's got to sort of grow together a little bit and get it together. Next up, the Arizona Cardinals go to Buffalo to take on the Bills. Kyler Murray gets a full season, or gets to start the season. We assume, health withstanding. He'll play the whole year. And he gets to go and take on Josh Allen. I know that it's sort of all like doom and gloom around the Bills right now with the exodus of talent, particularly at the receiver position. But I still think that they are better than the Cardinals, especially at home. I think Arizona is just a little bit out of their depth. I think Arizona makes this a feisty game. They were feisty all last year, even with teams that they had no business being feisty with. And I think that it's scrappy, it's hard fought, but in the end, Josh Allen just makes the extra play. Up next, Tennessee goes to Chicago to take on the Bears in Caleb Williams' debut. I'm trying to temper my expectations on the Bears just because it's so easy to get excited and to fall into the trap, and I kind of want to because I think the NFL is at its best when its legacy franchises are at the very least relevant, and the Bears haven't really done that for quite a while. And I really want to see the Bears be good. But he's a rookie quarterback. He's going to need to grow. And, you just never know how these dudes are going to perform when it's completely live and you're facing a full game plan. Like in the preseason, it's awesome that he looked good in the preseason. That's great. You definitely would rather have that than have him struggle against the most basic, non-game plan oriented defenses ever. You'd absolutely rather see him play well, and he did. But it's just a whole different animal. I mean, Zach Wilson was a preseason superhero in his rookie year, and obviously, as he's no longer with the Jets, that didn't work out. So I'm trying to temper my expectations of Chicago. However, I just don't think Tennessee's going to be able to get it done. Will Levis is basically an unknown, especially now with a new coach, new system, new all those things. Brian Callahan is an unknown, entity in and of himself as a head coach. The Titans, they have Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins, but the Bears are pretty decent defense-wise, especially ever since they added Montez Sweat last year, the Bears' defense has trended up. I think that Chicago's going to get it done. But I think that, particularly in the first half, this could be pretty close as Caleb Williams really gets his feet wet. Up next, New England, the Patriots. They go to Cincinnati to take on Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Jamar Chase may or may not play this game. He himself said he's going to be a game-time decision, I believe is the way he phrased it. I don't particularly think that matters here. I think the Bengals are on a mission this year. I think the Patriots were wise to not play Drake May because too many holes along the offensive line, not any real talent to speak of at receiver. You do not need to ingrain bad habits in that dude when you have the ability to play Jacoby Brissett and let him take that. I think that the Patriots are going to go to Cincinnati and the Bengals are going to kick this year off with a win, which is something they haven't done in the last couple of years. The Bengals tend to start slow, but I don't know, man. There's just something I'm feeling for the Bengals this year that I think that much like how Niners were last year, it felt like the Niners were coming into that year with something to prove. I'm getting that vibe about Cincinnati and from Joe Burrow in particular that they got something they want to prove, and they feel that this is the last year they have this group together, and they're going to try to get it started off right with a win over the Patriots. Up next, we have an AFC South matchup. Division matchups in Week 1, that is always scary just because you could be so rusty in Week 1, and this, if you lose this, it's like you didn't lose one. You basically lost 1.5. It's a brutal one. CJ Stroud, obviously, played phenomenal last year, Rookie of the Year. The Texans, they really capitalized on the fact that he's got that rookie contract. As soon as they realized what they had, they jumped this offseason, bringing in guys like Stephon Diggs and Danielle Hunter. That's huge. They've done good work. And Will Anderson was the defensive rookie of the year, too. So the Texans, they've gone pedal to the metal since realizing what they have. And I think that is the best way you can possibly do it. Indianapolis, I don't exactly know what I'm going to get. I have a feeling it's going to be pretty run heavy. But we just don't know what Anthony Richardson is. The thing that scares me most about him is that he's a guy that, everybody was like, oh, he needs time to play and really be developed and things like that, and he lost the year. Sorry to keep referencing the Niners, but that's the team that I've obviously followed very closely in my life. And I don't think Anthony Richardson is going to be this bad, but it reminds me in some ways of what happened with Trey Lance, which is They sat him the first year so he could just sort of learn in that way, like sort of mentally get it there. And then the next year was supposed to be the year where you physically catch up. And then he got hurt. He lost the year. And then obviously Brock Purdy came in also. So that was a whole other situation. But Trey Lance lost the year to develop. And so in essence, he never got to. And I'm just worried with Anthony Richardson that are the expectations going to be too high because it's going to be, well, it's year two, it's this, is that. Like, you have such a window when these guys are on that first contract that you want it to work and you want to be so aggressive. And I'm not saying that's what's going to happen. It's just my personal concern with it. He could just turn out to be awesome. And for the sake of the Colts fans out there, I hope he is. But until I actually know that and can see what he is, I've got to pick Houston. They just added so many great players this offseason. And it just feels so positive in that way. And I have a lot of respect for Shane Steichen and the job he did last year with Gardner Minshew. That I believe that the Colts will be good, but I just don't know if it's going to manifest in week one or if this is going to be a team that Anthony Richardson is going to need 3 or 4 games to really get his feet under him. So we'll see. It just feels like Houston's coming in ready to jump, and the Colts, maybe it's just because they sort of fly under the radar, and that could just be a bias on my part, certainly. But it just feels like Houston's going to jump them in week one, and Indianapolis is going to build momentum as the year goes along rather than starting hot. Up next, Jacksonville goes to Miami to take on the Dolphins. Ooh. This feels like the type of game Miami would win. Just because Miami tended to beat bad to mediocre teams, and then as soon as you reach the contender level, it's where they falter. I think Miami is good enough to just outscore Jacksonville. I don't think Jacksonville is going to necessarily be bad this year, but I think Miami just has more. And I think Mike McDaniel and his offense is just more. I don't know. It just doesn't feel like Jacksonville has anything that they can really throw at the Dolphins. And I'm a big fan of, I believe Josh Hines Allen now, I believe is what it is. I'm still trying to learn that, Jags fans. My apologies. I'm so used to just calling him Josh Allen. I hope Trevor Lawrence is good. I hope that a lot of things go well, but it feels like Jacksonville just doesn't have the weapons to get into a shootout with the Dolphins. I don't think Jacksonville has that, and I don't think Jacksonville has the defense to slow them down. That pass rush of Jacksonville will have to tee off if they're going to win. That's the Jags' path to victory, is Josh Hines Allen, he just has a monster game. And then Trayvon Walker really takes another step and shows why he was meant to be the first overall pick instead of Aiden Hutchinson. And then, the addition of Eric Armstead is also very good in the middle. So they got 3 guys, or theoretically they should be able to rely on them. And I think that this is the game where that's going to have to happen. Jacksonville is going to have to dominate in the trenches when their defense is on the field. But overall, I don't know, man. I don't know that Jacksonville has it in them to be that dominant to immediately slow down Miami. In a team that's got a lot of offensive continuity, I just don't know if it's there. So I'm going to take Miami in week one. But I don't think Jacksonville is going to be made a fool of. I think that we're just going to see that Miami just has one extra gear that they can get to, and that Jacksonville's a year away from getting to that type of level offensively in particular. Carolina at New Orleans. My goodness. If Bryce Young decides to take a massive leap and Dave Canales is a great young head coach, then maybe the Panthers have a chance in here. But this also just feels like in the Superdome, week one, feels tough. My main reason that I would ever hesitate on the Saints, just saying that the Saints are better and are going to beat them, is I don't have a lot of faith in Dennis Allen. I don't think he's going to make it through the year. Well, he might make it through the year. I don't think he's going to be there another year after this. I'm not going to sit here and die on the hill that Derek Carr is, this elite player. And so I guess sort of my lack of faith in the Saints' high-end ability is maybe the one thing that keeps me from just hammering it. And it's a division game as well, so it means a little something. Carolina might show up really, really fired up. but I'm still taking the Saints. I have no reason not to, other than my own. Just like I've seen how this team was, I might be getting scared off a little bit by what the expectations were last year and how they fell so far short. But yeah, I'm gonna take New Orleans, but if Carolina and Bryce Young and Dave Canales in particular have like taken some big leaps, that could be something interesting. Okay, Minnesota goes to New York and takes on the G-Men, the New York Football Giants. The shine has already been taken a little bit off the Vikings with J.J. McCarthy being out for the season. Losing your rookie first-round quarterback is not, it's not the type of thing that gets you happy. But I still have a lot of faith in what Kevin O'Connell does and the talent that is on the Vikings. Sam Darnold is not a world beater, but I believe he's capable enough when he's in good hands. He's obviously, based on his time in New York and Carolina, which there's not two places that might be more difficult to start your career right now. I think he's capable enough when he's not asked to do too much and he's in the hands of a really good offensive coach. And the Giants, I can sort of say the same thing, where I think Brian Daboll's a good coach. Now, the stuff that happened with Wink Martindale and him leaving this offseason, it's weird. And it shows the signs of the dysfunction that have sort of plagued the Giants really for the last 10, 12 years, ever since that Super Bowl in 2011. But, oh man, other than Malik Neighbors, I don't see anything on the Giants offense I got a lot of faith in, other than like Brian Daboll himself. Defensively, I think the Giants' front seven actually got quite good. Dexter Lawrence being the star of that. You add Brian Burns to really man down one edge. That's good. Kayvon Thibodeau on the other. I'd say he's a cut below Brian Burns, but he's still young enough that he could ascend massively. So I think the Giants have something cooking up in the front, for sure. They're young in the secondary, and so you never quite know. And oftentimes secondary play takes a little longer to develop. So I just get the feeling that the Giants just don't have it. I just don't think this is going to be their year. Unless Malik Neighbors is the level of receiver as a rookie that is a force multiplier and makes everybody else's life easier, and then all of a sudden Daniel Jones has this magical connection. Unless that is what is about to happen, I think it's going to be a tough year for the Giants in general. And I think Minnesota comes in even with a backup quarterback, and I think they will get this one done. Okay. Another division matchup in the AFC West. The Las Vegas Raiders go to Los Angeles to take on the Chargers. This is a tough one. The Raiders in recent years have had, a fair level of success against the AFC West and basically no one else. Like the Raiders have even managed to snag games off Kansas City. Denver hasn't beat them in a while. They usually split with the Chargers. Like the Raiders have done a pretty good job of just hanging tough in their division. And I don't see any reason that would change. I see reasons for the Chargers to be different, though. The Chargers, I believe, with the addition of Jim Harbaugh, have an identity now. And I think it shows in their first-round pick. With them taking Joe Alt instead of Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze, they've shown a commitment to a different style of football, a style of football that the Chargers really haven't played since Junior Seau was there, which is physical football. The Chargers are very much known as a very finesse team, a team that you're not particularly afraid to go in there with. Like, there are teams where just by culture, you're like, okay, you got to bring your hard hat for this one. Like, when you go to Baltimore or Pittsburgh, it's like, okay, we got to bring it. Really, the AFC, if you just want an example, AFC North football is very much like, we're here to play tough. Jim Harbaugh instilled that culture when he was in San Francisco, and that has carried through to today, where Jim Harbaugh made like a lasting impact in San Francisco, and it turned really quickly, around. Because especially in today's league, the physicality of the sport has gone way down. And the teams that are good at it oftentimes have a level of an edge. Usually when you face the really elite finesse teams, like the Chiefs, it's a little tougher because you're just not able to do everything you used to. But against everybody else, it's still a very useful thing because you can just sort of keep them in, make it ugly. And I think that this is the game where we see the changes that the Chargers have made. And I'm also not going to pick Gardner Minshew to beat Justin Herbert. I'm not going to pick Antonio Pierce to beat Jim Harbaugh. I'm the only player on the Raiders that I think could really have a huge impact on this game is Max Crosby. I think Devontae Adams is good enough to, but I just don't know that with Gardner Minshew as your quarterback that you're going to be able to take full advantage. And you lose Josh Jacobs. The offensive line is still teetering, to be kind about it. They add Christian Wilkins, so Max Crosby and Christian Wilkins. That's got to be it. They got to get pressure on Justin Herbert and hope that the way the Chargers are going to play ball is something that they can negate. But I think the Chargers get this one done. Not to mention it's in LA. Granted, when the Chargers and Rams play in LA, there's really not a big home field advantage. Okay, the Denver Broncos go to Seattle to take on the Seahawks. Ooh. I hope Bo Nix is good. As I said, sort of with the Bears, I think it's good for the NFL and the franchises that are usually historically pretty decent. I think it's good when those teams are good. And Denver's been down long enough that I wouldn't mind seeing some level of a resurgence out of them. However, I think going to Seattle is a brutal place to get your first start in the NFL. That crowd is loud. You're dealing with a Seahawks team that you don't really know what they're going to do. Your best guess is that they're going to look something like the Baltimore defense last year. They're a little less talented, but I think in the secondary they actually may be more multiple than what Baltimore was, but the front seven is just completely different. So I think Seattle's defense is going to be the huge wild card here. I think Seattle's offense isn't going to be much different. They're going to be able to hit some big plays, but I don't think they're going to be a super consistent bunch. But I think Denver's defense has improved from last year. After that 70-point loss in Miami, or not 70-point loss, but the game they gave up 70 points in Miami. After that, they really sort of locked it in. Numbers-wise, they're going to look bad from last year because of how those first couple games went. But the Broncos' defense really did start to reel it in by the end. And I think that they're going to start off a bit stronger. And this, in a lot of ways, I think it's going to come down to how well does Denver's offense handle the noise and the legitimate effect of the 12th man in Seattle. It's the most dangerous, in my opinion, the most dangerous home field advantage out there. It's the most potent out of all of them. Arrowhead is similar, I suppose you could say, but it just feels different when it's Seattle, at least to me. So I'm going to give the Seahawks the win in week 1. I think that's a tough task for a rookie in his first start. If they can get it done, awesome, but it's a tall task. Dallas, that go to Cleveland, take on the Browns, Cowboys and Browns. If this game was later in the year, I'd tell you that Cleveland would definitely win it because it would be cold and you'd need to play tough ball, and that's not really Dallas' style. Early in the year, when everybody's fresh, I think they got a decent advantage. But Dallas has something similar that I'm just a little bit of a spoiler here that I'll bring up about the Niners when I break them down. Is Dallas had a pretty drama-filled offseason, and there's a lot, frankly, even more so than San Francisco, that still looms over them, which is Dak Prescott doesn't have a contract extension, Mike McCarthy doesn't have a contract extension, CeeDee Lamb does, but it came a week and a half before the season, basically. So usually when these holdouts go that long, that dude does not start the year the way that you would expect him to. The way you would expect CeeDee Lamb to start the year is immediately performing near the top of the league in pretty much every category. And it just doesn't happen often. I can speak to this from last year. Nick Bosa, while he was actually pretty effective, he didn't get the sack totals early on. Those started to come closer to the end of the year. But it took him a little bit of time, a couple of games, to really get his legs under him. And there's a chance that that could happen to CeeDee Lamb. And the biggest problem for Dallas is that's really the only major weapon they have going for them on that offense. I think that Dak Prescott, the way that that situation is going to go, it's one of two things. Either Dak is going to respond really, really well and play like an MVP like he did last year until the playoffs, or, that pressure is going to manifest itself in a more negative way, and he's going to be forcing, he's going to be extending. It's like when the moments get tight, it's going to get even tighter because you're playing for your financial future here, and you just don't know. And I think Cleveland, it's a little more low-key of an offseason, probably because they're a bit more of a low-key team, certainly compared to the Cowboys. Dallas, man. I think Cleveland's going to play tough defense, and I think that with CeeDee Lamb's situation being what it is, he's going to be negated on some level. I think Myles Garrett's going to hunt. I just have a feeling Cleveland's going to take this. I think they're going to ground and pound the Cowboys. I think it's going to be close, but it just feels like something's a little off in Dallas right now. And I think week 1, Cleveland's going to be able to just jump it. Now, if Deshaun Watson plays awful, all bets are off. In fact, if Deshaun Watson plays completely terrible, Dallas will win. But I've seen Cleveland win in spite of him before. And I've seen the Cowboys choke a game away or 2 or 3 every single year. Up next, Washington. They go to Tampa Bay and take on the Buccaneers. Baker Mayfield and the Buccaneers. Jaden Daniels gets his first start, starting off in Tampa Bay. This is... I know Tampa Bay won the division last year. They even won a playoff game against the collapsing Eagles. It just felt like they punched so far above their weight class that I don't think that that's really going to happen again. In fact, I actually think Washington's going to go in there and beat them. I think it could be close. I just think Tampa Bay is an aging team, and when you're playing that game, the wheels can fall off at any time. And it felt like Tampa Bay really only got to where they got because they were part of the awful NFC South. And I think that the NFC East is a much more competitive environment, and so Washington will have more losses than Tampa Bay just because they're playing a tougher group. And I think Jaden Daniels just gives them a spark, and that in week 1 they'll go and get a win over Tampa Bay, even though rookies winning week 1 is not always, guaranteed, because oftentimes these dudes get shocked. Okay, so Sunday Night Football. We have a treat, in my opinion. The Rams, they go to Detroit and take on the Lions. Matthew Stafford returning to the Lions' den once again. This should be an interesting game. I think that a lot of people are pretty high on the Rams. I don't think that that's incorrect. I think that Sean McVay is an excellent coach. I think Matthew Stafford is an excellent quarterback who I'm constantly worried about his health at this point. I think Detroit is an ascending team that got, in my estimation, better this offseason. And I think that this could be a very interesting showdown. The Lions started off with a tough game last year against Kansas City and looked pretty sharp, especially defensively. And offensively, they took a little bit of time to get going. But offensively, they were able to retain Ben Johnson as the offensive coordinator, which may be their biggest move of the entire offseason. And a huge move. I think that's awesome for them. I think that the Rams are always going to be good. Puka Nacua, I know, has been dealing with a little bit of an injury. We'll see if that hampers him at all. Cooper Kupp, as far as I know, he's not currently dealing with an injury, but he's another guy where he's getting up there a little bit, and injuries have hampered him the last 2 years. But week 1, I expect that the Rams should be operating at as close to their full health as possible. Even so, I'm going to take Detroit for one simple reason. The retirement of Aaron Donald creates a very interesting scenario. The Rams' defense is already pretty unheralded just in terms of name value. That doesn't mean they don't have good players. In fact, they have several good players. But they don't have a lot of star guys. And they just traded away a linebacker as well. I forget. Yeah. He was a pretty good player, too. I forget his name. I think he wore 53 for them. He was a good player, traded to the Titans. I just wonder what the Rams' defense is going to be. Aaron Donald was so good. Such an amazing player that his existence on a football field was like a gravity well. You needed, three dudes at any given time having their head on a swivel looking for Aaron Donald, and two of them, at minimum, actively being on him. And when you remove that piece, what does that do to the rest? Because that enables so many dudes to get one-on-ones, or sometimes there has to be a free rusher and you got to get the ball out faster. What does it look like without Aaron Donald there? What does it look like when teams get to play them a little more normally? And I just think that the Lions' offensive line is a hell of a test to get right away for that. You know? Sewell's an all-pro guard. Ragnar's an all-pro center. Taylor Decker's another good tackle on the left side. You know? Like, their guards are both good as well. Detroit, I just think it's a bad matchup to get week one for the Rams. I think that after the Rams sort of develop their identity a little bit more on the defensive side, they could probably really give the Lions all that they could handle. But I think week one at home, Detroit gets it done. So those are all of the Sunday games. I'll do a separate breakdown for the Jets at the Niners. That will come out Monday morning. So yeah, once again, like, subscribe, share the video. Appreciate it so much. Peace.